He was Kobe's idol. Larry Bird, a player he is often compared to, called him one of the greatest scorers of our time. And he torched a David Robinson-led USA team for 46 points and beat them in 1987. But we unfortunately never got to see him play in the NBA due to restrictions on players playing in the league and also playing for their national team. I am, of course, referring to one of the greatest international basketball players of all time, Oscar Schmidt. I certainly wouldn't be the first account to cover Oscar Schmidt. A lot of other YouTubers have published videos focusing on telling his backstory, talking about his statistical accomplishments, and his team achievements. And that is all incredibly important in the grand scheme of things as far as basketball history goes. And to understand how great he was, you have to know what he accomplished. But I want to look at things a little bit differently. Oscar was clearly a major scoring threat and a good leader, that is no question. What I want to know, and one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history is, how good would Oscar Schmidt have been in the NBA if he had been allowed to play in it? I'm going to take a look at Oscar's game, see what he did well, and try to determine what kind of numbers he would have put up if he had played in the NBA. So let's get into it. So like I said, to understand how great Oscar was, you have to give some background on his story and his career. He was born and grew up in Brazil, and his development was anything but ordinary. Brazil was, and still is, a country where basketball is not the main focus. Soccer is what that country is built on, and Oscar initially wanted to be a soccer player too. However, he was too tall for that and ended up looking into basketball because of it. His youth coach, a Japanese man by the name of Laurindo Miura, used unconventional methods for practice, including picking up rocks with one hand and dribbling with the other, and also climbing over chairs and ropes. This clearly worked for Oscar though, as he was considered a prodigy by the time he was 16. He was selected by the pro team Palmeiras, and they did something that no other team in the world did at that time. They told the 6'9" forward that he would not be a big man, and he needs to learn how to shoot. From there, his growth went to the moon. First he made the Brazilian national team, then he made his way over to the Italian Serie A basketball league and spent a lot of time over there. His Olympic performances became stuff of legends. Anywhere he went, he was considered a legendary player, and his success backed that up. Bronze at the FIBA World Cup, and his most impressive achievement, gold in the 1987 Pan American Games over the US team. In that victory, he did a lot of the work on his own too, as the other players for Brazil weren't near on the level of the US players of the time, and Schmidt still pulled off that win. He is the all-time leading scorer for the Olympics and the all-time leading scorer in the history of organized basketball, with an enormous 49,797 career points total. So now that we've established what he was able to do in his career to form the almost mythical reputation he has, let's dive into the film to try to interpret how well his game would have translated to the NBA. Well, the first thing to be said about Oscar Schmidt is he could shoot the lights out, like to an absurd degree. He was well before his time in multiple aspects of his shooting. Firstly, his volume. The man shot on average for his career stats that are available to us, which we only have for the Olympics and his time in the Liga ACB of Spain. In those competitions, he shot on average 8.5 threes a game and hit 3.8 of them, for a career three-point percentage of 44.6%. Additionally, I heard that in Italy, in his prime, his numbers were 38 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 1 assist on 53.9% from the field, 46% from 3, and 89% from the free throw line. Though I couldn't confirm that from an official source, so I'm not going to be citing it, but regardless, if you just take the stats from those two competitions that we have good records of, that is insane. Like, there was no one even close to that volume and efficiency at that time. Reggie Miller was considered a prolific three-point shooter in that era, and he shot 4.7 threes a game at 39%. And while yes, Reggie played far better competition, shooting translates. Oscar would have been an absolute sniper in the NBA, there is no doubt about it. I mean, his volume playing in the 80s is only slightly lower than Steph Curry's volume right now, which is 9 attempts a game over his career, to Oscar's 8.5. They both hit 3.8 threes a game. And these are completely different eras. If he were to have come over here shooting like that, we could have seen an acceleration of the three-point era, and it could have begun much sooner than it has. There was just no one shooting like that over here at that time, and I could see him being extremely influential with his type of play. He was very fun to watch in the offensive end. Add this to the fact that he was one of the original stretch bigs. Like I said earlier, Oscar was not small, he was 6'9". This was an era too where the only guy that was that size that even shot a significant number of threes was Schmidt's idol, Larry Bird, and even Bird didn't put him up at that volume. Not even close. If he came into the league and they let him play how he wanted, he would have almost certainly led the NBA in threes made. Some of the types of shots he put up aren't even shots that you see today. He did this one thing where he would have the ball above his head and just launch it without bringing it down into a shooting motion at all. I don't see why more NBA players don't work on a shot like that because it is near unguardable. He had some versatility in the way he created shots for himself as well. While he didn't do anything flashy in one-on-one matchups, he would find a way to get a look that he could knock down. He used his size a lot to accomplish this. That's what made him such a mismatch nightmare back in his day. Most power forwards were accustomed to guarding on the interior at the time, and he would stretch the floor and make them come out. If the opposing team tried to put a smaller guy on him in the post, he had no issue backing them down and either getting the ball off the glass or hitting some tough fadeaway jumpers. His turnaround shots and his up and under were effective tools as well. All in all, just an electric scorer who is the definition of a bucket getter. Now, as great as Oscar was, there were a few holes in his game that he could have improved on and may have presented some challenges if he were to have consistently played in a better competition. The first and most obvious one is defense. Oscar was simply not a good defender, there's no way around it. It isn't that I think he couldn't have been passable, but a lot of times he seemed to not give even the slightest bit of effort on the defensive end. You can see a lot of these clips if he even slightly gets beat, he will often give up on the defensive play, and he also has a habit of simply not going all that hard to stop them. His athleticism was below par, and while on the offensive end he was so skilled that it really isn't that big of a deal that he wasn't an athlete, on the defensive end it for sure affected him, as he didn't really utilize any degree of defensive hustle or instincts to make up for it. He got beat on closeouts a lot too, as he would fly by guys to try to block them on numerous occasions. To give him credit, he did okay when he was locked in on D against back-to-the-basket style 4s and even some 5s, as he was strong enough and long enough to hang with them and contest. His second flaw in his game was that he wasn't a very good passer. Now, admittedly, he didn't need to be, as even though he shot a lot, his percentages were great. More often than not, him taking a bad shot was probably better than one of his teammates taking a good one. But that being said, there was plenty of times he could have hit an open man and just didn't have the court vision to do it. Would that be different if he played in the NBA? I don't know. I know that his shots would have been challenged more often, and I know he would have been playing with better teammates as well, but there isn't a ton of evidence that he would have been a better playmaker in a different environment. I think it's fine that he didn't pass all that often, but if he had made it to the NBA, he would have had to show more on that front, as defenders who are generally way better than the guys he was playing would find a way to make it tougher for him to score. And when someone throws a double, you want to see a player have the ability to make a team pay for doing it. So in conclusion, what do I think Oscar Schmidt would have done if he was in the NBA? Well, like I mentioned in the shooting section, I think he would have been game-changing as far as the three-pointer goes. Instead of Steph being the first guy to bring ridiculously high volume three-point shooting accompanied by a really high percentage to the NBA, he would have been the one to do it. He would have been an offensive force and would have made the Nets, the team who held his rights and would have been the team to have him if he were to come over, a decent team. In my opinion though, they still wouldn't have been great and almost certainly wouldn't have been championship contenders. Schmidt would have added an interesting dynamic to that roster, but the roster wasn't all that good. His running mates would have been basically Otis Birdsong and Buck Williams, and while they were fine players, they weren't the type of guys that would have been considered building blocks for a big three. You're looking at a team who's competing in the East in the era of Larry Bird's Celtics, and Isaiah Thomas Pistons, and even a young Michael Jordan's Bulls. As good as I think Schmidt was, I just don't foresee him being able to best teams like that without having a high-tier team around him, and I don't think the Nets were that. Alongside this, I think his struggles on the defensive end would be more apparent in this era, guarding guys like Bird on a consistent basis. I think he would have come in and been an elite scorer, somewhere in the high 20s to low 30s throughout his prime here, but because of the unlikelihood of his team actually competing, the real impact he would have would be the added emphasis on three-point shooting that I think the league would lean into. I would note though that I think that Schmidt's game would be electric in the modern day, and he'd likely be the preeminent stretch big in the league if he played right now. All in all, Schmidt was a legend, but I think he made the right decision to do what he did. He has an insane reputation in basketball circles, and he's an icon for Brazil basketball for choosing the national team over the NBA. And who knows, maybe if he did join the NBA, he would have just been another good scorer who got forgotten and underrated in the grand scheme of things like Bernard King or Adrian Dantley. The status he has now as a Hall of Famer without ever playing in the NBA, a national team legend, and a huge what-if story in everyone's eyes is a pretty great legacy to leave. But with that, we conclude this video. If you guys stuck around here to the end, I always want to show appreciation for that. It means a lot. I enjoyed breaking down Oscar Schmidt's game, as I've always been fascinated with his story and his game. So if you enjoyed watching, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. Thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hey, thanks again for watching this video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and click on one of these videos here to see more.